Hello and welcome to the JCN Clinic podcast show. I'm Jessica.
So,
And we are together again. The gang's back together. It's been a while. And we're going to talk about perimenopause today because you guys just can't get enough. We're actually talking about managing calorie intake for perimenopause, which is such a big topic and very I would say an area that we're getting hit up a lot about, and you just see a lot about in socials. Like it's just a thing, right? I said peri too. It's probably should say menopause within that realm. We'll go into that, but it's everywhere. Everyone wants to know everyone wants to know everything.
Everyone wants to know everything. Everyone's talking about it on social media platforms. I literally have done, I think I've done how many seminars on it in the last few months?
Yeah. I could probably Carissa would be like, no, because it's end of day that we're recording. We usually record start of day. But I was just thinking I could just like hand Carissa over the microphone. She could just like do a seminar. And I'll just sit back with the popcorn.
You actually could. But no.
Exactly.
I was looking at the topics going, Jess can have that one, I'll have that one, Jess can have that one. Oh dear.
No, it's so huge, guys. Like, I'm sure there's listeners who are just like, yes, awesome, as far as this topic. We have touched on menopause and perimenopause a fair bit in the past, but yeah, we really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of the food side because we see it we see it heaps in clinic, but even the uptake of clients that are like coming to us for peri and menopause management, and then even I think interestingly, like clients that have been with us for a long time who are in almost like a maintenance type phase, and they're just like being long term with their health, which is great, like keeping on top of their yearly consults and so forth. But even there, I'm finding, I'm not sure yourself, Rissy, like they're conscious of this as they're getting into their like early 40s, mid 40s, or even like late 30s. Like they're just so much more on the ball about it and like coming actively and just saying, look, I starting to like notice changes, or I'm just aware of this and I want to get across it. Like I just feel like when we first started seeing women of this age demographic, you just didn't get that. Like it's like a real conscious, active, like, no, I want to like do what I can for my hormone health, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. I was actually like just had a little bit of I don't know if you call it a fangirl moment, but just like a little bit of a fuck yeah moment. And I just got onto my Instagram stories yesterday and I was just like, what an exciting time it is to be working in women's health. Like, yeah, because I was just like, there's just so many people talking about hormonal changes, perimenopause, menopause, even fertility more and the postpartum space and things like that. But there's just so much credit and conversation now happening in the women's health space, which for decades there just hasn't been. So I'm so glad we work in this space. And I do agree with you. I think 10 years ago, there's no way a client would have booked in to see you or I at the age of 38 and said, I know I'm coming into my perimenopause years and I want to prep for that. Like it was unheard of. And I don't think, some of our clients that maybe, I know I've got quite a few clients at the moment, some of them that I have seen for, over 5 to 8 years through various things. So we start with gut health and they have babies and they might, they're raising their little humans, and then they book back in with me in their 38, 39, 40 or early 40s. And they're like, okay, let's do this perimenopause space, Carissa.
That's so true.
I'm like, well, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, I think it's super exciting, and it's a great time to be, it's always a great time to be, a woman looking after your hormones, but it's great to be working in the space and finally, the conversation's not taboo anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to put in the show notes, and I'm writing a note as I do this for myself, the episodes that we've done on menopause and peri. So we have spoken about them more in the context of like what's actually happening and like the transition with hormones. There's quite a few. So I'll make sure I put them in the show notes. I promise. If I don't, hold me accountable, but I will. I've written it down. So that's when things happen. So as we said, we're going to focus today more on managing calories, which is more obviously about food and managing food intake through peri and menopause. And the reason we wanted to touch on this is because a huge part of what we see, and it's interesting actually, I guess, even for myself and even for you, Rissy, like without, I don't want to throw you under the bus as far as like what's going on with where we're at in our age brackets, but like there is a transition where things change with your hormones, obviously, with respect to peri and menopause, and how your body is responding metabolically is shifting, and how your body will change in how it wants to hold on to and store fat is changing. So really, like the classic thing we'll see is many, many women who feel like they've been able to eat in a certain way, in all dynamics of that, right? Like, but they've eaten a certain way, whether that's inverted commas, like a good healthy way, or under eating, or maybe overeating, depending on their metabolism and needs. But it's just not working for them anymore. Like their body is storing fat mass. And that's one of the big shifts that women will start to notice around this time. It's often, it's interesting, like I want to say there's like also sometimes depending on how much is going with hormones, there can be like a change in how the body even stores fluid, like as far as systemically, but often this like sort of fat gain can be more around the midsection, actually mainly around the midsection realistically, the butt, the thighs, but yeah, there's a lot of storage of fat that starts to happen around the midsection, and it's a big part of what brings people into the clinic or onto socials and asking these questions. It's absolutely does women's heads in, because they're like, I've been eating this way for the last 30 years of my life, it's never been a problem, I haven't changed anything, I'm still exercising the same, what's going on? Like, I don't understand. And it kind of opens the door, of course, onto this whole education around why what you put in your mouth every day as far as calories actually does matter. And not that it never doesn't matter, right? Like, but
Correct.
it's just maybe more having to be mindful of like what you're doing when you haven't in the past.
Yeah,
I don't know if you wanted to add to that. I feel like I waffled a bit. So
no, I think you're right. I think you pretty much summed it up. I think it is the majority of the women that we see that come in. It's more like, not that we are ever super weight focused with our clients. Like, I know it is something we work on with our clients, but I know as a clinic we're not a weight loss clinic per se. But within the hormone space and women and the female hormone space, it is a huge part of what happens. And I was going to, when you said before, throw me under the bus, I had a little chuckle to myself because I am 40 this year, but I feel like in terms of perimenopause symptoms and managing weight and estrogen, I feel like I've been doing it since I was 30. So I have this joke. I have this joke with my clients. I'm like, I know perimenopause typically 35 to 38 to early 40s onwards is when we would classify someone in perimenopause. But I'm going to say I've been living and breathing this space for 10 years because of just the way my hormones behave. So I'm gearing up for the 40s, man. I'm ready for it because I've done so much work in this last decade to understand these bitches that I am so ready to have them work for me and not against me. So
so true. I would say I'm in a bit of a weird I feel like I'm in a bit of a weird space because like I've always trained regularly, but like my training over the past years has gotten like more and more demanding as far as like what my expenditure is. So it's like this kind of weird, like I don't actually know if I wasn't doing this, like what my body would be doing as far as how it would change and what it would be storing. It's it's something I don't actually know the answer to at this moment. One day when I stop and sit on a couch for a few months, I'll circle back to that one and see what happens if I develop a tire. The menopause peri-tire.
Yeah, dear. Yeah, I feel like though too, like I'm trying to think when you and I first started working together, that would have been, oh God, it would have been before perimenopause for you though. But I feel like your composition is so different because of the training you've done. So you're so right. Do you know what I mean? Like in the decade we've worked together, I've watched you do, I think, gosh, almost three very different training styles, but from that obviously with very specific composition goals, right? So yeah, so you've been very onto your nutrition. Of course, that's your fucking job and mine, but we've been very onto our nutrition. But you and I both love the training space, so you love it. You've done some really cool things over the last decade. So yeah, your composition would be interesting if you hadn't done all of that, I reckon.
Yeah. I guess that's where we look at our parents too, like not our dads, but our mums, like seeing what they look like my mum's in her 70s, and I sort of I look at her figure and like she doesn't train heavily in any way, and just thinking about watching her go through this time of her life, and obviously without the tools that we have. It's interesting. But anyway, I kind of digress, but not because it's on topic.
No, it's on topic. I was actually going to say it's like different to you. My mum is we're a similar body shape, but a different composition. Like my mum's not estrogenic at all, which is very interesting. And she's actually almost 8 to 10 kilos lighter than me. So she hasn't ever really had the weight. I'm not going to say weight concerns because I'm not concerned about my weight as in size, but I have to work hard to maintain a healthy weight for me. I've had to do that since I reckon I was about 28 or 30. Like healthy weight management for me doesn't come easy. Like I have to be very onto what I eat, how I exercise, and I do sympathize with women when they say if I can put on weight, if I look at a piece of cake, like I understand that. Like I laugh about it when they say that to me, but I understand because I'm not someone who has naturally been easily lean. But my mum is, mind you, she doesn't eat anywhere near as much as I eat. Be part of it. And she did smoke until she was 55, so that probably helped as well. So that's from an appetite suppressant point of view. So I think I looked at anyway, I just find it interesting. Like if you look at your parents sometimes too, sometimes for me it's definitely not the best gauge.
So interesting. So I think why, before we get into some of the nitty gritty of the calories, like why is it harder to actually lose weight? Like we did touch on that as far as the changes that are happening with your hormones. I feel like I don't want to go too deep into that because we've done podcasts on this topic, but one of the more, there's actually a few things I want to talk about here, but hormonally things are shifting, particularly as your estrogen drops off. I mean, there's different fluxes of what happens with your hormones from peri into menopause. Again, go listen to the episode. But as particularly estrogen's dropping, it's going to have an impact on how your body stores fat and how your body wants to hold on to fat. Unfortunately, that's what happens. It's a really shit thing that we have to deal with on top of other factors as far as estrogen dropping and how it affects our body. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, besides what is fundamentally going on with your hormones, which comes back to this whole topic, is how your metabolism is set up going into peri and into menopause, because this is where I think back to why do calories suddenly matter? If and Carissa and I are probably good examples of this, if you've spent your years eating well and eating a good amount for you to support your metabolism, not under eating, not overeating, and we all undereat and overeat occasionally, but we mean day to day, month to month, year to year, eating a good amount of food to sustain a good, healthy metabolism. If you've exercised and trained and you've included strength training over the years, as you come into this time, if you have good metabolic health and you have good muscle tone, well, I hate the word tone, if you've got good muscle capacity and muscle strength, muscle percentage like on your body, you're going to go into this time of your life where things aren't as much, they're not going to be as hard. You're not sort of hitting the wall as hard. Whereas you can, it can be absolute shit show as far as how hard it can be to like either lose weight or why what you're eating seems to matter, because not only you're fighting hormone changes, but you're coming into this time with like a really poor metabolism from decades of not eating well, poor relationships with food, not exercising or training in a way that actually supports your hormones more beneficially. So I guess I just really wanted to, and we will talk about that more in respect to food, but I really wanted to highlight that because, again, we see this so much where like women are struggling like 10 times harder than they should be because they haven't had this foundation leading into this time of their lives. And it's also something that I think that, again, going back to family, I've seen my mum, my aunts, like that sort of like boomer generation struggle with immensely because they come from a time where everyone's response to weight loss or controlling weight was to just not eat as much or to cut fat. Just don't eat. And if you're going to exercise, like make sure it's like cardio, you know, just flog yourself with cardio. No one's like lifting heavy weights or doing anything in that realm. So I just think it's really like important to paint the context of like how like you can find yourself like feeling like you're hitting a wall, and I guess also to paint like why it's important to consider these things further with what we're going to talk about. But yeah, was there anything you wanted to add to that as far as like the why?
Yeah, I think that's perfect what you've said. And like you said, we have done a podcast on perimenopause, what the F is going on. So we have explained that. But I just also want to touch on like it's perimenopause itself with what happens with the hormones. It is almost like a bit of a, I call it like the vicious triangle between like estrogen, cortisol, and insulin. Because if you come into your perimenopause and menopause years, as Jess was saying, and the foundational stuff isn't there and you've already gained some of the weight, what happens is the body creates more fat cells sort of in response to stress or in response to these, you know, changes and estrogen changes and stuff like that. But if you've gained a considerable amount even before this happens, then losing it is so much harder. And insulin plays a really big role here because insulin's a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to weight loss, that the more fat you have, and I'm not saying, I'm using this word like very carefully, but I'm just literally talking about it from a composition point of view.
Yeah, for sure.
The more fat you have on your body that is not opposed by a decent lean muscle mass, the more insulin resistant you are. And I think that's a big one for women to understand, because if you're already carrying extra weight and you go into your perimenopause years where your estrogen is fluctuating and then into menopause where it starts to decline and you're already at metabolically unfit and your insulin is already somewhat dysregulated from yo-yo dieting, and then all of a sudden you're trying to lose weight, you almost have to retrain your insulin to behave better. And that is fucking hard when you're insulin resistant. And a lot of women in perimenopause, I believe, don't actually realize that they are insulin resistant. If your BMI, and again, BMI is just such a very small part of this, but it is worth mentioning. If you are, you know, carrying more weight, and even if you go in and do 4 weeks of really awesome eating, you may not see a shift on the scales because your insulin is still dysregulated. The more fat cells you have without lean muscle mass to oppose it, the more insulin resistant you are, and the harder it is going to be to lose weight. So you are playing the long-term game if you haven't laid the foundations. And I think that needs to be made really clear with the weight loss thing, because I work with women all the time, and even though they may be 100% committed to what I tell them to do, they, after 8 weeks or 6 weeks, if they haven't seen some sort of composition change on all the food stuff Jess and I are going to talk about, it, they get really frustrated. Look, I fucking understand. I totally understand it. But it's because it's got a lot to do with insulin. and insulin itself. And, so I just wanted to mention that in there as well, that insulin is a really, really important hormone in this space. Like you'll hear a lot in perimenopause conversation around estrogen and cortisol and the stress response. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about progesterone and decline and all the other things. But insulin is probably, I'm going to say, one of the big regulatory hormones here that, we focus on with diet, because once you start to rein that little bugger in, the weight loss is a lot easier.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks for explaining that. You explained it really well too. And I think I love what you just mentioned about the long-term game there, because which will come up more and more. Like this is not short-term win stuff, like particularly when you've got decades of poor behavior around how you eat, dieting, etc. And yeah, Chris is right. Like there's a lot of women that get to this point, and if they're not seeing results in like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, they're just like, it's not working, like the frustration. But you're dealing like with so many factors, and like really understanding the time that it takes and committing. It's like anything. It's like, working with like a chronic gut issue. Like there's these like layers and different elements that we have to work with, and like this concept of like retraining and rebuilding, remodeling the metabolism and how it responds, which is through food and through exercise and through potentially some form of supplementation if needed. But I mean, the cool thing about this, I feel like with peri and menopause, is so much like can be done without even touching a supplement.
100%.
It's just having like the commitment and the willpower, the consistency is my favorite word here, to actually stick with it and to want to see the long-term gains instead of being like hijacked by like the thought of like some other way of like quickly doing it, as you may have done in the past, or going and buying Ozempic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which, exactly. Ozempic should be we can do a podcast on that on its own, I think. Yes. And I think too, like, I was just going to say about just the time, just to give people a bit of a gauge, like for me, someone who has to work really closely with insulin levels, like I have to be very on to my blood sugar balance. I have to manage my estrogen. I think I talked about this in another podcast, but not to scare anyone off. But when I came out of my back injury and I'd put on 4 kilos, and I am an insulin-y person, I am an estrogenic person and cortisol, all things. So I'm the classic perimenopause picture. For me to healthily lose 4 kilos without impacting my thyroid, which also doesn't like to be starved or, carbohydrate deficient, or any of the tricks we would have done in our 20s, for me to healthily lose 4 kilos took me nearly a year. So I didn't have a lot of weight to lose. That's not to scare women off that are listening going, 4 years, you've got to be joking. I'd rather go get Ozempic. That's not to say that. Like I'm talking 69 kilos down to 65. Like it's not, I'm not in the place where I've got 10 to 15 to 20 kilos to lose. But I'm so aware of my body type, how my energy, thyroid, all the things that I need to feel great. And I still want to have a fucking life, but to do that in a healthy way, but also work with my insulin and estrogen and cortisol, like that's a time and commitment thing that I trust the process. I know what we do because we prescribe this every single day to 20,000 clients, not every single day to 20,000 clients, but you know what I mean? We're busy.
Busy day.
Busy day. But I know the process and I trust the process inside and out. But I also know, even for me, just to give people a time frame, if you're someone who's at the pointy end of weight loss, and you've only got a few kilos to lose, if you're that woman who has only gained 5 kilos, the 5 kilos is harder to lose than the 15. I'm going to be honest. Like, so I think that's really important, just as a bit of a personal highlight.
Yeah, no, very, very true. Which, again, comes back to those expectations of how quickly weight should shift. I feel like anything, like even with younger people, like if they drop even half a kilo a week, I'm ecstatic. Like that to me is like, whoa, no faster than that.
No faster than that. Yeah.
Like that's that there can be some pretty extreme expectations. So again, that's really good to highlight. So let's talk about, the concept of like undereating and overeating and why both sides of the coin don't work. I think we've mentioned it a little bit here. And I think as we talk about this, we're probably going to start touching on like why this time can be really important to really start to know like what you are actually eating and what it looks like. So it's like where to start. I'm like, where do I even start?
Don't do either.
Don't do either, full stop. So, I mean, let's start like overeating probably is one that makes more sense to listeners. There is a certain amount of energy we expend every day as far as our general basal
metabolic rate.
Basal metabolic rate. Thank you.
So you're trying to say?
When you start saying something like that sounds really wrong.
Sounds really wrong. It's like, is this what she's trying to say?
Was totally. I just had a complete mind breakdown.
Oh, great.
So how much your body is going to expend just to exist and live, and then there's how much we are expending on a daily basis as far as movement. So there's how much we expend versus how much we take in, and if we are exceeding how much we're actually using on a daily basis, on a rudimentary sort of base as far as calories go, that excess intake can lead to weight gain. Depending, I'm going to put lots of caveats, which reminds me way back to a podcast we did eons ago on why calories matter and don't matter, which absolutely was one of the biggest troll producers that we ever had.
Oh my gosh.
Because Carissa and I dared to talk about how calories aren't everything, how other things matter. But essentially, if we're over consuming, that will lead in a lot of circumstances to increasing fat storage. I don't think that's anything mind-blowing for most people listening. However, undereating, to touch back on that, is a very common response by many females. And as we said, boomer generation classic, but I would definitely not put our generation out of this as a way to control calories or control weight, because it would have worked at some point for their life. A lot of people through their decades have just leaned out of what they're eating, how much they're eating, maybe skipped a meal here or there, whatever they've done, and it's worked in the past. However, it'll only work for so long. And as we get into this time in our life where Carissa has explained already about how we're potentially, in a lot of cases dealing with dysregulated insulin versus also what's going on with our hormones, we're already starting to hit that wall where our metabolism is not going to respond in the same way. Over also potentially decades of yo-yo dieting, we can do a lot of damage. Seems a bit extreme, but we're going to definitely cause some dysregulation in how our metabolism responds. Like, our body is smart, and if we have constantly put it in a state of stress by starving it, it will naturally slow down in how it responds to preserve that fat, because that fat is our stored energy. And that can be by how the metabolism is responding, can be by how the thyroid gland is responding. So it's like you're kind of trying to use this like really shitty tool decade after decade, and initially it works, but there's a point where the body's just like, I'm out, this is shit, this doesn't work for me. Like, it's no longer coming to the party. And then on top of that, like, you're dealing with these additional layers where you're fighting now against your hormones. So what we see is that a lot of women will either come to us or will hear this feedback through socials where they've tried this. So they're just like, I've tried restricting my food, or they're often have been eating a significantly lower amount and just nothing shifts. And what they'll commonly say also, interestingly, is what you said before, Rissy, is like, I just look at a piece of cake and I gain 5 kilos, or like, I eat this from Monday to Friday, but if I go out on the weekend and I have a meal out, or I have a meal out and a cocktail, I'll gain like 3 kilos on the scales. So it's this like, and then they'll just go into the next week and just starve themselves more. So the under eating is the one that I think is the most disturbing, like, because of the impact it has like further on the metabolism and how it actually is setting up women even more so for sabotaging the metabolism further, let alone the amount of like nutritional deficiencies over time that they can develop, and including your macronutrient deficiencies because they're just not eating enough, even not, let alone their minerals and their, you know, day-to-day vitamins. It's like they're not even getting enough protein or enough fats. And then like, how's that even helping?
Yeah. And it's also worth
ranting.
No, it's all right. It's good. It's also worth pointing out too that, you know, that classic under eating and sort of, you know, starvation method, or fasting or whatever it may be that freaks the female body out. Like, it's worth mentioning that when you do something like that and then you just go back to your normal diet, which this is not this is not a mic drop moment. And we all know this now, it's been talked about a lot, but you know, women will gain that 3 kilos back really quickly. They'll go out and just have a weekend where they have a cheese platter and cocktails. When you lose weight in a healthy way and you build your lean muscle mass and you are metabolically responsive to the way you eat and your insulin is managed, you can then go out and have your cocktail and your cake and you won't put on 3 kilos because your body is now metabolically fit and able to deal with these kinds of things because they're not the normal, they're the exception. And, you know, and that is the difference too. Like you can still go out, you can go away for a week and just not have to think about things, eat well. And you'll probably be lucky if you gain half a kilo. If that, if anything, if you lose weight in a healthy way. The other thing that happens in perimenopause as well, which is also too why it's probably just worth mentioning, is that we naturally lose lean muscle mass as we get older as well. So you know,
good point.
So what women are constantly doing and to try and lose weight in the perimenopause space is under eating, over exercising. So going back into what either what they've watched their mums do or what has worked them in their 20s and early 30s. So you're actually under eating and definitely under usually eating protein. So you're actually accelerating and overtraining with cardio. So you're breaking down muscle and you're already in an accelerated muscle loss mode, which is essentially sarcopenia, which is what happens in perimenopause and menopause. So you're just putting the foot on the accelerator of the problem and creating a stress response, and then excess cortisol dysregulates insulin even further and we end up with weight gain. So overeating makes sense. Like you overconsume calories that you're not burning, you're going to put on weight. But under eating is actually worse because you're just metabolically and hormonally stressing the fuck out of your system. So please don't do it.
Like the muscle mass component, like, again, thanks for pointing that one out too. That is such an integral component in all of this. And obviously we're going to probably bring up the strength training quite a few times with relation to this, but like, it's one of those things that, again, sort of personally really gets my blood boiling just watching the women in my life who are in their 70s, who have navigated menopause and are still falling into this trap where they're under consuming so much and their way of exercising and training is definitely to push with cardio, and not being like responsive when you suggest to them about the benefits of the weight training. But from a dietary point of view, again, which we'll talk about, where they're not consuming, like they're under consuming already, but they're not even because of that, they're not meeting their macronutrient needs for protein. So like that muscle wasting, which is already naturally occurring, is being, as you said, like so deeply accelerated, to the point that it's having like so much more of a profound effect beyond just weight. Like I see them struggle so much with fatigue. I see them struggle with getting sick a lot. Like it really is one of those areas where I think there's such a lack of education around, because it has such a profound effect on aging overall. And the irony is that, like, the less they eat, the more their metabolism slows down and they're not as hungry. Those satiety, the satiety signals are all dysregulated. They're like, generally what I see too is, I know I'm kind of again going off on a tangent, but like they're not eating protein because all they're craving is carbohydrates because they're so fatigued because they've got poor energy. So they're living on like tea and toast, Like it's just like this self-perpetuating cycle of like under eating and then also under consuming their protein. So the muscle wasting just continues and it goes round and round and round in a vicious circle. So it's just such I think the other reason why it like really gets me is like I look at it and I'm like, it's really simple. Like you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money on products. Like, you know, you just need to eat better to look after yourself and make these fundamental changes and, you know, just get a little bit of basic education, which is what this podcast is about. So the muscle wasting component is huge, and unfortunately a lot of women, but also men, I would say, exacerbate it tenfold by the way they respond to it with what they choose to eat. That's just my 10 cents on that one.
Perfect. It's perfect. Oh dear.
So protein, I think this sort of like leans into this idea of like what is adequate as far as like calories and protein. So we've talked about under eating, we've talked about overeating. A lot of you might be like, well, how do I even know what to do? So this is where, in an ideal way, if you could, working with someone like a clinical nutritionist is bloody amazing, because we can help you figure this out and really fine-tune things. But one of the ways that we tend to work this out for clients is actually doing a little bit of tracking. There's a lot of free apps that are out there. And what I like to do is encourage my clients to just track their food for a week or even just 5 days and include the weekend and just track what you eat as per normal. Don't go doing anything different to try and impress anyone. And what we want to do is just get an example of like what your standard intake is, because what the average 45-year-old to 50-year-old eats is dramatically different. And it's really hard to get an idea of like what is adequate for you without knowing what your daily intake is. I mean, Carissa and I can definitely like talk to someone and go through their diet and get a very good rough idea, like just by knowing food so well. But, you know, for the average person, they're not going to have any idea at all. So really finding out what your like daily intake is, and then being able to look at that and what that comes in at, and then where you're at as far as we're going to say, like with this whole conversation, that it is around weight loss and wanting to lose some fat. We're going to be able to look at that and look at what we need to do. Now, the big thing is that number. So I guess to throw some very rough numbers, which I kind of hate doing, but I personally don't like to see women eat under 1,500 calories, maybe 1,400 maximum, like as a low point. But if you track and we're seeing that you're coming in at like 1,000 calories a day, 800 here, 1,200 here, which is so low, that is where we can see that you're coming into this under eating space. So we're not going to look at that and go, oh, we need to like knock some calories off here. That's going to put you into that dangerous space that we were just talking about even further. We're going to make you feel, well, yeah, exactly. We're just going to make you feel more shit. So you could go, this would be someone who would like be trying to like take more away, or they go off and see a PT that doesn't know any better and they're just flogging them harder and they're like, why isn't anything happening? So that tracking and seeing where you're coming in is really vitally important for how we respond. If you track and you're up around, say, maybe 2,000 or 2,200 or 2,500, that gives us a lot more wiggle room to look at, okay, you're actually consuming quite a lot. Again, in comparison, we want to know what they're doing, what their movement is. That might make sense for them. And then we can look at whether we need to, from there, create a bit of a deficit and to take away. But to get an idea of like what is your normal, we really need to know. And I feel like it's a really good tool that, again, is free And that is a good empowering like option for women to start to like get an idea of like what, because most people again don't understand, right? Like we see it all the time. You pull them off the street, they don't know how many calories they eat in a day. They don't know how much protein, carbs, fats, what's what. And once you start, even with our clients that have seen us for years, if we go into doing this, it's this whole new educational process where they start to really get a good grasp of like, wow, when I eat this meal, this is like when Jess and Carissa are talking about having a macro balanced meal. Now I see it. Look at that protein. Look at those carbs. Look at that fat. So I definitely think that is a really important way to start. And I feel like when we talk about an example of adequate calories in a day, like, yeah, I'm going to put out that sort of rough 1,500, but I feel like there needs to be a billion caveats around it. I'm curious to what you think there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would rarely drop a female below 1,500 unless they are actually trying to lose weight and we've got that room to move and all of that. I feel like most women who are exercising at what I would say a decent level, and by decent level I mean those 2 to 3 strength sessions a week, 2 to 3 strength sessions a week, and they're quite active as well. So they're going for walks, maybe 3 to 5 days a week, and they might be doing like, either a run or a bike ride. So they've got a little bit of cardio in there as well. Most women, I feel like in that space in perimenopause, realistically probably need to sit somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 calories. That's what I find. I rarely find a female that I've got a couple that I've got over 2,000 calories, and that's because they are exercising quite a lot. Like these are the women that are doing 3 decent strength sessions, like I'm talking proper heavy lifting sessions. They're doing probably 2 cardio sessions, like, and I'm again talking proper cardio, and they're walking as well. So these are very active women. So when I've got women doing that level of training, they're more up around the 2 to maintain weight or lose weight. They're around that sort of 2,000, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. And the protein goal is, I've got a protein goal of up over 120 for those women. For most women, like when we're talking about protein and how much, like I've got most women, again, probably somewhere between, let's say 1,600, maybe 1,900 calories with a protein goal of maybe 100, 110. Some days might be 80 or 90, and that's okay. But realistically, we're aiming for 100 and a little bit over most days for women who I would say are more doing maybe just a couple of strength sessions a week and doing a bit of walking and a bit of light cardio. So when we're talking like 1,500 calories to 2,200 calories, it doesn't sound, well, it might sound like a lot to some people, but I've had clients say to me, oh, that's not a very big sort of, like gap, if that makes sense. And I'm like, well, it is when you think about it over a week, because if you're someone who only needs 1,600 calories, or let's just say if you're someone who only needs, who isn't really doing much exercise at all, you're not even in the strength training space, and your BMR, what Jess was talking about before, basal metabolic rate is, your BMR might only be 1,360 calories, or it might be 1,270 calories, or whatever the fuck. You're someone who sits at a desk all day. You still got to add on a couple of hundred calories because you do get up and move. So let's just say your actual like maintenance calories for doing fuck all exercise and what you do day to day is 1,600 calories, and you're consuming 2,100. Oh, it's only an extra 500 calories a day. Over 7 days, that's 3,500 calories. Did I just do that fucking maths right?
I was about to say, good maths. I am, for a Wednesday afternoon, I'm impressed.
Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about an extra 3,500 calories a week, we're talking about almost 2.5 days worth of food. So you're actually, you know what I mean? When I explain it to my clients like that, or if you're just over consuming 200 calories a day beyond what you metabolically need, that adds up to an entire day's worth of food in excess calories at the end of the week. So, and it's not like it just wipes itself and resets. When we're talking about calories, again, we're talking about
Monday and it resets.
Yeah, that's what I've had clients that just are in that mindset that it just resets. Yeah. Like if they overeat one day, they'll just undereat the next day, but or they could do the same. And I'm like, it doesn't reset itself. It's time and consistency. So if over a 3-month period, you are in a calorie surplus of 1,000 calories a week, I don't know how many fucking days that is, but it's a lot. And you and these are the little things. So this is why tracking is really cool, because Sometimes it's literally, and this is where I know the devil can be in the details sometimes your protein and your macros can be bang on, and you can be someone who's actually eating really well. You're hitting 30 to 40 grams of protein with, you know, each main meal, which is what we recommend women to do now, or we have done for ages, you and I, but you know, the rest of the world's catching on, so that's fucking great. You know, so if you're someone who's doing all of that, and that's great, but you've got an extra 200 to 300 calories coming in from just mindlessly snacking or, you know, things like that, that over a week is where you're going to see your weight gain. And as we become more insulin resistant, as our estrogen changes, as our cortisol, you know, is a bit more stressed out, we're not as stress resilient as what we were, that extra day's worth of food week on top of week is going to cause you to put on weight. And that is why calories matter. And that is why, I don't know, that's the end of our podcast. No, I'm joking. I was like, we've just done it, Jess. We can sign off.
We've done it. Yeah, look, tracking's amazing. Also, you don't need to track like all the time. I'll often have a client, and I'm sure Chris is the same, like you'll track for a period of time. We can assess that together, and then we'll make changes, and then we might get you to track like, you know, maybe another 5-day to 7-day period once a week, not once a week, once a month, depending on how things are going. You don't have to do it every day for the rest of your life. Like once you start tracking, you'll start to see and learn very, very quickly, like what is roughly equaling what, and how your days tend to look on a plate to hit around a certain amount of calories, give or take. Like there's so much that you'll learn from that process. I just wanted to definitely highlight that it's not something that you have to do forever, because it can become very intense to keep doing. And also you've got to watch that doesn't become triggering with like tracking and getting overconsumed with food. But please understand it's a very powerful tool. Everything Carissa just said, like 110%. I just want to speak to kind of like the other end, as far as like if you do the tracking, like as Carissa said, if there's that 1500 sort of base, and it's rare we would go under, but when you start adding ideally the strength training on top, which we've like talked about a lot in other podcasts and mentioned a lot today, with the context of building up that muscle mass, being more anabolic, like being in a process of really getting that metabolism going, it's going to be a big contributor to needing more, as she explained. What I wanted to talk about though was also, once you do the tracking, if you come in under. So if you're an under consumer, which we see a lot of, what we need to do is we need to build you up. And this is one of my favorite things to do with clients.
It's so creepy.
I just love it. I know. Favorite. I love doing this. And it was very, very mentally challenging for women, but I'm just like the advocate in the back. Come on, we can do it. We can't create a deficit. You're not up around 2,000 or 2,500 for us to create that deficit. You're training, and as Carissa said, maybe you're just having some excess food. We need to build you back up. So we need to ideally get you doing some strength training. That's going to be your biggest asset to start strength training, because you're going to build muscle mass. It's going to be more anabolic. It's going to help get your metabolism revving up, and it's also going to start slowly changing that composition of muscle to fat mass on your body. It's the best thing you can do. But as we do that, what we want to do, and really I find it's hard to do this without strength training, is we want to build up your food. And this is what I love doing with clients. So we actually put you, and there's a lot of trust in this, but we actually get you to increase your food. So we're building you back up into a better space, as far as how much you're consuming. And if you do it correctly, you won't gain fat. You might see a bit of a change on the scales, but what will be happening is that you'll be gaining muscle mass, and you'll actually be changing your body composition. So we will build you up. And in an ideal world, even if you did gain like a little bit of fat as we did that, if we can build you up to around 2,000 calories, which would blow some people's mind if they track and they're like, well, they already know they're listening to this and like, I eat 8,800 calories a day. I can't eat more. We build you up to like 2,000 calories. Then we create a little deficit. If you're like, okay, now let's, I'd like to drop a little bit of fat. That's easy at that point. And as Carissa was saying, we get you to that point where you're not in this like space where if you have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it's this like massive impact on your weekly calorie intake. Like if you only eat 1,000 calories a day, like if you go out on the weekend and have a meal out and a cocktail, you've like often doubled what you usually take in a day really easy. Whereas if you eat 2,000 calories a day and you go out and have a meal, like it's a smaller dent, but essentially we want to build you up and then we can start to take a little bit away. And that's where you're not when you do take away a little bit of calories, you're still maintaining the muscle mass. So you're losing fat ideally, and you're maintaining muscle mass. So you looked ripped and awesome if you really want to do it the right way. But no, you're maintaining that good body skeletal muscle mass and really holding on to that, and you're actually chipping away at the fat mass. And that, my friends, is a beautiful thing. And I can think of a client at the moment, she'll probably listen to this podcast, who has just recently sent me her, it's probably another thing we should mention, getting her, what do you call them? Like your body mass.
DEXA scans.
Yeah. Thank you. DEXA scans. And like doing this, trusting the process and seeing the muscle mass go up and the body fat come down. It is so exciting. And it's another really good way to track this process. Don't rely on the scales, ideally. Like that is something that you can do maybe every sort of third month if you're doing a process like this. But I cannot express enough, if you are an under consumer, how important this is. I also have clients that I've talked to, I'm blue in the face about doing this, and I cannot get them to budge. I wish I had the magic wand, but they are just so stuck, unfortunately, in the old school patterns and so much fear that I cannot budge them. And I keep saying 800 calories because the person I'm thinking of pretty much consumes between 800 to 1,000 calories a day.
Literally, sorry.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, I've literally had clients the same where like I've lost them over the fact that I can't meet them and get their weight loss goals while they're eating 800 to 1,000 calories a day, and they just can't mentally fathom coming out of that. Like we have so many conversations around the psychology of it, the research of it. I recommend them seeing someone like, from a psychological point of view, all the things, but literally you just get to the point where it's like, I actually don't know what else I can do for you, because I need to slowly build you here. And if you can't do that, I can't get you the weight loss. Your body is literally stressed the fuck out and starving right now. Like this is and it's I've got clients that I have not been able to pull out of it just purely due to mental resistance and conditioning of what they think weight loss should look like.
It's actually a really good point. I know it's probably a little bit more of a sadder point, and we'll think of something uplifting to end on, but honestly, like if this is you, if you're in this point, we actually don't have much we can do to help you if you won't meet us where we're at. Like we don't have any magic tricks when you're stuck in this space of like severely under eating. And like, I mean, it's hard enough when someone's like not in peri or menopause, like as far as the damage that can do to their metabolism over time. But to be in peri or menopause and to be locked in at low calorie intake with a yo-yo dieting background, and if you're not willing to do the work, like honestly, like we're not going to be able to help you, which sounds harsh, but like we don't have a magic trick. Like we have cool tools and we can help you, but as you said right at the start too, it's not a short-term thing. Like you have to have trust in the process of going, well, Jess or Carissa or Rochelle has asked me to like for the next 3 months actually start consuming more, and they want me to like go and do these workouts, and like this is what I have to do, and I have to expect that in 3 months like I'm not going to be shifting weight, I'm actually working on building up my metabolism. Like, you got to be mentally okay with that. And for some people, they just can't. But then there's ones that can, and they make us smile.
Yeah, 100%. I also want to say on in that space as well, not that we're ending the podcast on doom and gloom. The other thing is I want to mention hugely in this space with the weight and calories and all of that in perimenopause too is the stress. Like, again, I've had some clients where like it's just gotten to the stage where it's like, if you can't change your stress situation, and if that's work, which for some of the women I've worked with in this space it is, they're high functioning high functioning women in high functioning either CEO, EA sort of spaces, and they just overtrain and overwork, and they might eat well, but again, when we're talking about the hormones at play, like, again, this is the podcast that got us in so much hot water with the trolls years ago when, we dared to say that it's not all about calories. Like, you can, I believe, and I have seen it, consume a calorie adequate diet. But if you are overtraining and stressed to the max and your insulin and cortisol is dysregulated because of that, you will really, really struggle to lose weight. And I have seen that. Likewise, if you are just borderline type 2 diabetic and severely insulin resistant, like it will be so much harder for you to lose weight, because that, again, is just a stress in itself. So I feel like the insulin resistant space, we 100% can work with what we've talked about from a food point of view. But if we can't control that, or at least work with that stress point of view, and I'm not talking day-to-day life stress, I'm talking the women that I'm thinking of that I've had a couple over the years. I'm just like, these women, like, my adrenals would have fucked off out of my back and set themselves on fire if I worked at the stress levels of these women. Like, literally would have poured petrol on themselves and striked a match and
up and fucked your back. Where are they exiting out your butthole?
Out my back, they cut little slits and just leave.
Fuck this, we're out of here.
Fuck this, we're out of here. Just pour petrol on themselves and just
oh my god,
literally,
that's hilarious.
my dreams would just be fried. But yeah, that's something else I wanted to mention too. Like, there's so much we can do with food and protein and movement and that whole beautiful space. But for all of my perimenopause clients, like, and yours as well, Jess, I know you guys have got to meet us halfway. Like, we can only do so much with our toolkit. The other thing I want to mention is fucking alcohol, just while we're on it. If you're also not willing to, if you are a big drinker in the perimenopause space, and sugar, these guys have got to go, guys. That's all I'm going to say. Like, you can still have a drink on the weekend. Like, I'm not saying you have to go totally sober and things like that, but if you are having a couple of glasses of wine every night to relax, like, again, like, your body will not deal with that from a detoxification point of view, but also just from, it's another stress. And that's something I've really struggled with a couple of my clients. Like, they just won't stop. They just won't give up the booze. Like, they're so, tied to those few glasses of wine. And I'm just like, if you could do 12 weeks off that, like, fuck me, we could see some composition changes for the exercise you're doing and how well you're eating. I just want to touch on sugar and booze as well, because they're two big crutches that in perimenopause, they will not give you the results you want if you can't really be honest with yourself about how much of them you're consuming.
Yeah, no, love it. Yeah, it's really an exciting space in that this will give you so much reward if you put in the work and the consistency. And the cool thing is, the more you do the work and the consistency, it's just habits. It's just lifestyle habits. Like, once you do it, it's easy, like, that's what I just find so baffling about it. But every woman needs to make a decision about what they're happy with. Like, I guess if you're how you feel in your own skin, like, that's completely up to you. Of course, there's like health factors, like in how your body changes through perimenopause too, that, again, are topics of other podcasts. But from purely like a weight point of view, like, if it's something that is really getting you down and it's something that you want to change, like, there's plenty of options and tools, and it's pretty awesome. So we love it. We absolutely love it.
We love it so much. So much. So much, it's sickening.
Yes, exactly.
Give us all the perimenopause clients, please.
Yes. We actually look, if you've listened and you're just all like, yes, please, like this is awesome, I need some guidance, I need some help, like any of our practitioners at the clinic are really well versed to deal with this. We do actually though have a perimenopause package. We call it perimenopause, definitely like it is menopause as well, which is run by the lovely Carissa here. So that is that is very specific to this area. So you can have, I'll put it in the show notes, you can have a look at that. But if you're just wanting to like kind of get an idea and touch the surface, like any of the practitioners available to look into this deeper with you. Do you want to also say about the other stuff that you're doing as well?
Yeah, and probably if you're someone who is kind of like, I feel like I don't really need a one-on-one consult with a nutritionist at the moment. I feel like check out, I put it all over our socials, but I've got the 4-week perimenopause nutrition package that I run with the Soul Sister Health Girls. And this is a really good foundational space. Like if you're someone who's like, I just want to know how to eat well, what calories sort of look like protein. It's got 4 educational, like it's run over 4 weeks, but there's like every week we've got a topic like protein and macros, sleep, exercise. Like there's heaps of Q&As around all the things. It's just a really good general package for someone who's quite new to the space and is just confused about hormones and things like that. But if you're someone who's a little bit more, got a bit more going on, like what Jess was saying with the under eating, or you got some big estrogen stuff going on and you really want to get deep dive into your hormones, then do a one-on-one consult for sure. So yeah, 2, we've just got so much on offer in the perimenopause space. I think you can't go wrong with any of the options.
Yeah, so true. Love it. Absolutely love it. We usually finish off with some recommendations, which you have? I think I have one. You go first.
Mine's a series. I've already told you about it because you've already watched it apparently, or you did say you've watched it. And I've told Steph about it as well. Anyone could watch this, but I feel like it's definitely just a bit of a chick series. The Bold Type on Stan is 3 girls who work for a Scarlet Fashion magazine in New York, and they're definitely younger, they're definitely millennials, but I can't get enough of it. Like, honestly, I fucking love it. I think and I'll just give some context around other shows that I find similar. If you liked Emily in Paris, I think you said this as well. Like, it's that sort of kind of quirky office dynamic space. Anyway, I can't get enough of it. Like, I wish I could just take 2 months off work, just watch the whole thing. But let's face it, I could probably do it in 4 days at the rate I'm watching it. So.
You are a good binge watcher. Like when the way you devour series always impresses me. Yeah. I'm like, when you're like, I just finished that in like 2 days. I'm like, what?
Because that's what I'll do. And then I won't watch anything for a while. Like I'll just half-ass watch things. But once I find something, like I will just hammer it because I just can't get, and then I'm done for a while. I won't find a series again for a while, or I've been reading a few books, which is really cool. So I'll go to a book, or I'll go back to my art stuff. So I kind of have something that tunnels my attention. But when I find a good series, I'm just like, you cannot pry me away from the TV world.
Yeah, I love it. I actually started watching the one you told me about, Selling Sunset.
Okay, yeah.
I'm like, I think I'm already on the 2nd season. Yes. I'm like, yes, this is a good recommendation.
Yes. Again, I feel like Selling Sunset is like, I think I said that to you, it's like The Hills for me. Like their lives are so far removed from anything in ours that you just can't help but be addicted to watching it. Yes. But how epic are the houses?
So cool.
Oh my gosh.
It's like for the $40 million one that is I've been looking at the moment. It's just like, oh my God, I can't get my mind around it.
How do people have
this
much money?
Yeah.
How? That's what I fathom. I'm just like, what world do people live in where they have this much money?
Just absolute billionaires.
Just billionaires.
It's a different world.
It's a whole
absolutely different world.
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend, kind of off the back of our topic today, 2 tracking apps because I don't know
good
if I did
idea.
mention. So one is the old school MyFitnessPal. When you sign up for MyFitnessPal, it can kind of make you seem like not force you, but it kind of looks like you need to pay. So just be careful with that. Like, just make sure you sign up for a free account. You don't need to have a paid account for MyFitnessPal at all.
No.
The other one that I love is called Cronometer. I actually think I'm liking this more at the moment, although MyFitnessPal free account, which is definitely another reco that people might not know, you can go into the food recipe section and you can drop in a URL from a website and it'll like copy the recipe in, and you can just check it to make sure it's all right, and then like tell it how many serves. So say you wanted to add the gut-friendly bread, you can like literally drop it in, say it makes 10 serves, and then when you go in and make your breakfast, you can just choose 1 serve of gut-friendly bread. So MyFitnessPal,
cool. I didn't know
it's
that.
awesome. So I use that a lot for clients and doing food plans. Cronometer unfortunately doesn't have that in the non-paid section, so you have to enter things manually. But the way it's laid out is really nice. I really like using Cronometer, and I feel like it has more data to like look at and so forth. But again, free, like you don't need to pay for it. I've been using both of them, but lately Cronometer's been awesome. And I guess even with respect to this topic, like I use it on and off. I'll like
same.
I try to use it for 5 days in a row, but let's be real, Jessica, I'm lucky to do 2 or 3.
Yep.
I use it more these days to make sure I'm getting enough. So like even with this is a good, again, just with respect to this topic, like once you know what you're roughly eating, like it's good to do check-ins occasionally because you think you're eating a certain amount and you may not be. So like I'm trying to make sure I eat enough of like a pretty bloody high calorie amount. And by tracking occasionally, it's awesome because I can be like, yep, I'm hitting it, or like, oh shit, I'm like, I'm actually coming in under, I need to have more of this or that. But yeah, they've been my 2 favorites.
I just had this flashback to grilled when you and Mel got like double fucking beef burger patties because you were both like lifting weights and needing protein, and I'm
the
just
extra
like,
protein.
what are you two? You just had these double burgers.
So true. Oh my God. Oh, now it's like trying to, make sure there's enough protein, but not like the carbohydrates and getting the carbs up high enough, and like the appetite's like insane. But yeah, also, do you know what's the hardest is the day, like the long run days, as you would know when you go out for your like long walks, like you're out for such a long time. So often it goes over a meal. Yeah. So you're taking your food with you, but if you're running, like, foods, you got to get down your gels and like figure out like what bars and blah, 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 whole nother topic. So you're trying to get in a certain amount of calories with that, but you come back and often after a long run, like it actually takes you quite a while for your metabolism and your satiety. I keep saying satiety, it's the wrong word. Sorry guys, but for those hunger signals to come back. So like you actually can feel not hungry for like potentially the rest of the day, or for like a couple of hours. So you just kind of got to like get the food in, which is like another game of just like get the food in when you're not hungry. Just like push it down. And it's weird because you can feel your body needs it, and like you put it in, it's like that feels better. But then it's like, it's not enough, give me more. Be like, but I'm not hungry. But anyway, long-winded, Cronometer, MyFitnessPal are my 2 faves.
Can't wait for you to do a podcast on all the things you've learned now that you're doing this long distance running, because I feel like
I'd like to.
I think
do you think everyone would be interested?
I feel I'm going to answer for them. Yes, I think. I think I've got a really good handful of clients that would be, because they ask me questions that I don't have the answers to because I've never done the distances you're doing. And just the differences with the gels and some of the food that you felt like has worked. Like I see you do little different gels, but even just the baby food, I'd never even thought of that for my clients. I think fucking electrolytes is another topic we should cover. Like people are always asking me what electrolytes to take. And I think it's so different depending on what you're doing. Do you need glucose? Do you not need large amounts of glucose? Like I think, I feel like what you're doing when you've, curated your art or whatever. I think it'll be a good podcast because I've got a lot of clients that are in the trail running space and things. I think people get some really good information.
All right. No, that's good to know. I must admit, when I do put up those Insta stories and stuff about it, I get a lot of questions and DMs about it. Like there's a lot of interest. So let me know, guys, or let us know, like if you'd like us to do podcast on fueling endurance training, let's call it that. But also on electrolytes, which would kind of come into that. But if you're interested in that, just let us know. Slide into our DMs.
I think it'd be great. We could do it, and I can be like the question person, and you can.
I like it.
Do it like an interview of the endurance athlete.
Let's do it. Let's do it after COSI, maybe.
Yeah, do it after you've done that. I think
I'll be like, this is what not to do.
I actually had some clients that did that. Was it last year or the year before? I can't remember, but yeah.
Oh, I did COSI.
Yeah, and they've done one down in Tassie too. That's a big climb too. But I think they've got COSI coming up this year as well. So
cool.
Yeah, I should give you their names actually. Obviously, I won't do that on air, but yeah.
Are they doing the 50 or the 100, or you're not sure?
I think she's doing the 50. I'm not sure about her husband. I feel like he might be doing the bigger one. I think it's COSI that they're doing. It sounds like it's that. I feel like they did it last year. She shattered her foot and just ran on got a stress fracture and kept running.
That's bad.
I think it was COSI that she did that. Anyway, they're right into it. They would love that podcast.
So, anyway. Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. Anyway, you guys will stop just chatting away. Thank you so much for listening. Please share the episode. And I know we have asked before, and we're going to ask again, if you could just take like 10 seconds to just go to the review section on iTunes and leave us a little 5-star. You can write us a nice little message. We'd love that. But if you're just like, I don't have time for that, just give us a 5-star rating because it really helps others find us. We bloody love it when you share the podcast on your socials, so please do that too. But otherwise, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.